It feels like yesterday, though so much has passed since my world fractured and then, unexpectedly, began to mend. I remember sitting at my polished oak kitchen table, a relic from a happier, more hopeful time. My leather-bound journal, a silent confidant, lay open before me. The late afternoon light, thick with golden dust motes dancing in its beams, filtered through the immaculate lace curtains Derek had insisted upon. The kind that spoke of quiet elegance but in reality let in just enough light to illuminate every flaw, every speck of dust, every hidden sorrow. My hand trembled as I uncapped my fountain pen, the fine nib poised over the creamy page. The tremor was slight, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make the ink feather at the edges of my words, a physical manifestation of the constant, low-grade tremor in my soul. In neat, careful script that belied the chaos raging within me, I described the way my husband, Derek Sanders, had sneered at my latest paycheck. I'd been quietly proud of the bonus I'd earned, a hard-won testament to a grueling project I'd poured my nights and weekends into. A small, silent rebellion of competence in a life where I felt increasingly incompetent. He had glanced at the pay stub I'd foolishly left on the granite countertop, a rare oversight in my usually meticulous efforts to keep my small triumphs to myself, and laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, completely devoid of humor. A sound that had become all too familiar. Chump change, he'd called it, waving the paper dismissively as if it were a soiled tissue. That's cute. It barely covers the gas for my car for the month. He dropped it back on the counter, a piece of trash, and with it, my momentary surge of pride had deflated, leaving behind the usual residue of shame and inadequacy. I turned the page in my journal, the paper whispering in the quiet room. I wrote about the time just last month when he'd shoved me against the hallway wall. The argument had been about something so trivial I couldn't even remember its genesis now. Probably I'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning or bought the wrong brand of imported coffee. But his frustration with the multi-million-dollar deal that had gone south at work had been a gathering storm looking for a place to make landfall. And I, as always, was the closest, most convenient shore. The impact had knocked the wind out of me, the back of my head connecting with the wall with a sickening thud that had echoed in my ears. A deep, ugly bruise had blossomed on my shoulder, a secret I had to nurse with ice packs hidden under dish towels and conceal with artfully draped cardigans and carefully chosen necklines. For weeks I recorded with painstaking accuracy the precise, chilling words he had whispered in my ear just 2 weeks ago. I'd finally found a sliver of courage, fueled by a sleepless night of his dismissive snores, to confront him about his cold, indifferent distance. The way he looked through me as if I were a pane of glass, smudged and unimportant. He had leaned in close, his breath smelling faintly of the expensive single malt scotch he favored, and hissed, his voice a venomous lullaby, "No one's going to believe you, Monique. No one." I paused my writing, the nib of the pen hovering over the page. A single drop of ink welled at its tip, threatening to fall and mar the pristine surface. The words stared back at me, a litany of small and large cruelties, a meticulous catalogue of my own private hell. I had documented them as if they were evidence for a trial that would never happen. Who would be the judge? The jury? My own children, perhaps, when they were old enough to understand the silences and shadows that filled their childhood home. I slammed the journal shut, the sound unnaturally loud in the cathedral-like quiet of the house. I felt a wave of helpless despair wash over me. How long could I carry these memories alone? My journal felt less like a confidant and more like a co-conspirator in my own silence, a heavy, damning record of my cowardice. I tucked the book beneath the mattress of the spare bed I now slept in, a concession I'd made months ago to give him space for his late-night international calls, and rose on shaky legs to begin the ritual of preparing the dinner he would likely criticize or ignore. That night, at 9, the oppressive quiet of our home was shattered by Derek's voice booming from the dining room, which he had commandeered as his secondary office. Its antique table now scarred with coffee rings and the impatient gouges of his pen. His tone, usually so warm and patient with his high-value clients, had taken on an agitated, imperious edge as he berated a subordinate over the speakerphone. "I need more from the team, more revenue, more commitment, more damn hunger. This is not a charity, people. Results are the only thing that matter." He slammed the phone down onto its cradle, the expensive plastic cracking audibly under the force. He turned, his eyes dark and stormy, instantly finding me standing at the doorway. I had only been on my way to get a glass of water to soothe a throat that was perpetually dry with unspoken words and unshed tears. But in his eyes, my mere presence was an intrusion, an indictment of his authority, a distraction from his self-proclaimed greatness. "You hear me?" he asked, his voice low and menacing as he pushed back from the polished mahogany table and stalked toward me, his movements like those of a predator sizing up its prey. I need results around here. I am bleeding myself dry to keep this empire afloat. He gestured vaguely around our tastefully decorated home, a home I had designed the interior of, a fact he had long since forgotten or, more likely, chosen to ignore. And you, he continued, his lip curling in a sneer, with your little designer salary, your hobby job, you barely make enough to cover the utilities. I'm tired of being the one holding us up, carrying all the damn weight in this marriage. My pulse quickened, a familiar, sickening flutter of fear in my chest that spread like ice water through my veins, chilling me to the bone. I forced my breathing to remain even, my expression carefully neutral. It was a mask I had perfected over years of practice, a placid surface over a churning sea of terror and resentment. I opened my mouth to answer, to say something, anything. That my salary was substantial, that I contributed significantly to our household, that this house was a home because of my effort, my care. But he cut me off with a derisive flick of his hand. Save it. You wouldn't know the first thing about real business if it kicked you in the stomach. The unintentional cruelty of his words, the casual violence of the metaphor, sent a jolt through me. A premonition so sharp and sudden it made me gasp. A flash of memory so vivid it was almost a hallucination swept through my mind. Another shove in the hallway, another whispered threat that nobody would ever believe me. I swallowed my tears, the bitterness rising in my throat like bile. I turned without a word and walked back to the kitchen. Silence was my only shield, my only defense against the storm that was my husband, the man I had once loved with every fiber of my being. The man who was now a stranger wearing a familiar, handsome face. My journal entries were a testament to that slow, agonizing transformation. A secret history of a love that had curdled into fear. In the weeks that followed Derek's pronouncement about my financial insignificance, my world narrowed and shrank until it felt like the walls were closing in on me, the air growing thinner with each passing day. My life became a series of carefully executed routines, a tightly choreographed dance designed to minimize friction, to keep the beast of his temper dormant. Every morning I would rise before him, moving through the silent pre-dawn house like a wraith, making sure the coffee was brewed exactly how he liked it, strong, black. And waiting for him in his favorite oversized mug the moment he descended the grand curving staircase he was so proud of. I would kiss my children, Jasmine, now a thoughtful 16-year-old, and Elijah, a boisterous 12, on their foreheads before they rushed off to school. Their youthful energy and casual affection, a temporary balm on my frayed nerves, a painful reminder of the joy and ease that had been systematically drained from my own life. Their laughter, when it occasionally echoed through the sterile perfection of our home, felt like a foreign language I was slowly forgetting. Every evening I returned home from my job as a senior graphic designer at a prestigious downtown firm, a role where I was respected, valued, and even admired for my talent and professionalism, to a house that felt hollowed out. An elaborate stage set devoid of genuine warmth or connection. I would set my grocery bags down silently on the cold granite countertops, putting everything away with the practiced efficiency of a servant so as not to disturb Derek's late-night work calls from his home office, the door of which was always firmly closed. I threw myself into my work with a desperate intensity, finding a precarious solace in the clean, predictable precision of color palettes, the satisfying logic of typography, and the quiet, objective satisfaction of seeing my work in glossy print or on sleek websites. My career was the one part of my life he hadn't completely suffocated, the one arena where I still felt a sense of competence and control, though not for his lack of trying to diminish even that. But behind the closed doors of our beautiful, architect-designed home, the tension simmered, a constant, low-grade poison in the air we breathed. On the rare occasions when I found the courage to speak up, to gently question his explosive anger over a misplaced set of keys or his extravagant spending on client entertainment that never seemed to include me, I was met with a cold, dismissive wall. "Don't make this a thing, Monique," he would say, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, before turning his attention back to his phone or his laptop, rendering me invisible, an irrelevant piece of furniture in his grand design. Or worse, he would lean in, his eyes glittering with a cold, predatory light, and repeat his mantra of control, his voice a soft, chilling whisper, "No one's going to believe you. Everyone knows you're sensitive." Each time, my confidence, already eroded to a fragile shell, wavered a little more. I began to believe him. Perhaps I was too sensitive. Perhaps this was just how marriage was for some people. One Saturday afternoon, I finally broke. Over lukewarm coffee and stale croissants with my best friend, Tia Roberts, in a quiet corner of a bustling cafe near our church, the carefully constructed dam of my silence cracked. Tia had been watching me fade for years, her concern a constant, unspoken presence between us. "Monique," she said, her voice laced with years of pent-up worry and frustration, her hand reaching across the small table to cover mine. "This has to stop. He's killing you by inches. I see you. You're stretched so thin you're about to snap. You deserve better than being talked down to, being shoved around. I've seen the bruises you try to hide with long sleeves and strategically placed scarves, even in the summer. We can get you help. There are resources, people who understand." I stared at my latte, at the delicate foam art the barista had created, a perfect, ephemeral heart. My own heart felt like a jagged, broken thing beyond repair. A single tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek, dripping onto the worn wooden table. "I can't," I whispered, the words tasting of ash and defeat. "He controls everything, Tia. The house, the money, the insurance. He'll take the kids. He told me he would. He said he'd paint me as an unfit mother, and with his connections, his charm, who would believe me over him? He's Derek Sanders, pillar of the community." Tia's hand tightened on mine, her grip fierce and certain. "I believe you," she said, her eyes burning with a conviction that momentarily pierced through my despair. "And that's a start. That's more than enough for a start." Despite her unwavering support, I remained paralyzed by fear. Every time I allowed myself to imagine leaving, to picture a life free from his shadow, Derek's warnings, delivered with such cold, calculated certainty, would echo in my mind. "You'll be on the street, Monique, a single mother with nothing. No one will help you. You'll come crawling back." Then, on a clear, deceptively beautiful spring evening, 3 days before our 17th wedding anniversary, a day I now dreaded with every fiber of my being, everything changed. I was alone in the living room, the house unnervingly silent. Jasmine and Elijah were at a youth group lock-in at the church, a small mercy. Derek was out, purportedly entertaining a client, though I suspected his entertainment involved a woman whose perfume sometimes clung faintly to his expensive suits. My hand strayed to my still flat stomach, where a secret I held close, a secret I had barely dared to whisper even to myself, was growing. I was pregnant. After years of painful, fruitless trying, after countless doctor's appointments and hushed, hopeful conversations that had ended in tears, I was pregnant. A wave of ice-cold dread settled in my chest, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. How could I bring a child into this house, into this life? But mingled with that dread was a fierce, newfound determination, a protective instinct so powerful it momentarily eclipsed my fear. I would not let this child be born into a house of fear. I would not let my story, and more importantly their story, end in this suffocating silence. This baby was a sign, a reason, a catalyst. That night, when Derek came home, his mood surprisingly affable after a successful client dinner, I was waiting for him. I had decided to try one last time to reach the man I had married, to appeal to the father he was, the father he might yet be. As he drove me to the grocery store for the late-night ice cream he now demanded with increasing frequency, I spoke my truth into the tense silence of the luxury sedan. "Derek," I began, my voice trembling. "I have something to tell you. I'm pregnant." He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes cold and unreadable in the dim dashboard light. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something. Surprise? Shock? But it was gone in an instant. "Congratulations," he said flatly, the word utterly devoid of warmth or joy. His attention immediately returned to the road. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs with a mixture of terror and fragile hope, sank like a stone. But I pushed on, a foolish, desperate gesture. I reached for his hand on the gearshift and he yanked it away as if my touch had burned him. "Don't talk about that now," he snapped, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You're always so dramatic. You'll never be ready for what's coming." We walked into the brightly lit 24-hour grocery store in a tense, suffocating silence that felt more oppressive than any argument. I moved through the aisles like an automaton, selecting a pint of his favorite artisanal salted caramel ice cream and a bottle of juice for myself, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grasp them. At the checkout, Derek made a show of refusing to let me pay, a performance of benevolent control for the young, tired-looking cashier. "I've got it," he said, swiping his platinum credit card with an air of magnanimity. The cashier offered me a small, sympathetic smile, a fleeting moment of female solidarity that almost made me weep. As we turned to leave, Derek leaned close to me, his voice a soft, venomous whisper meant only for my ears. "You better be careful with this, Monique. Very careful. No one's going to believe you if something goes wrong." The words, a twisted, sinister echo of his usual threat, landed like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. 2 nights later, the night before our anniversary, something went horribly, irrevocably wrong. An argument sparked by a late utility bill I had forgotten to pay ignited the inferno that was always simmering beneath the surface of our lives. He roared about my incompetence, my uselessness, how I couldn't even manage the simplest tasks. His frustration, likely fueled by some unknown failure at work that day, a pressure he couldn't release on his subordinates or clients, found its usual target in me. He backed me against the wall in the upstairs hallway, his face contorted with rage, his voice a torrent of abuse. And then as I tried to turn away to escape the verbal onslaught, he struck out. It wasn't a slap or a punch to the face. Nothing that would leave an obvious mark for the world to see. It was a single, brutal, directed blow to my midsection. The pain was blinding, a white-hot starburst that stole the air from my lungs and sent an agonizing shockwave through my entire body. I gasped, a strangled, tearing sound, and crumpled to the floor, my hands instinctively clutching my stomach, a desperate, futile attempt to protect the precious life within. Tia, who had come over that evening with a small, hopeful anniversary gift for us, a gesture of faith in a marriage she knew was dying, heard my cry from the living room. She rushed into the hallway. She saw me on the floor, writhing in agony. She saw Derek standing over me, his chest heaving, his face a mask of shock and dawning, horrified rage. She didn't scream. She didn't confront him. She simply pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling with the keypad, and dialed 911. In the sterile, curtained-off bay of the emergency room, the world had been reduced to a nightmarish tableau of hushed, urgent voices, the rhythmic, indifferent beep of the heart monitor, and the vast, roaring vacuum in my ears. Grief was a physical presence, a leaden weight pressing down on my chest, making each breath a conscious, painful effort. I was vaguely aware of Tia's hand gripping mine, her knuckles white, her face a mask of anguish and fury. The ER team moved around me with practiced efficiency, their questions and examinations a distant, muffled intrusion on the private hell that had just consumed my world. I thought of Derek's sneering promise, "No one's going to believe you." And for the first time, I truly, deeply believed it. What could I do? Where could I go? I was broken, shattered, and he had won. The tiny, precious life that had been my secret, my hope, was gone. Extinguished by his rage. Dr. Raul Martinez, the attending physician, had a kind face, his dark eyes filled with a weary compassion that spoke of too many nights spent witnessing human tragedy. He had been gentle as he conducted the ultrasound, his touch surprisingly delicate for a man of his stature. But when he finally turned off the monitor, the silence in the small bay became absolute, broken only by my ragged, choked sobs and Tia's whispered attempts to comfort me. He pulled his rolling stool closer, his gaze direct and unwavering. "Monique," he said, his voice low. "I am so profoundly sorry. We've lost the pregnancy." The words, though expected, landed with the force of another blow. The room tilted. The fluorescent lights above me swimming in a sickening haze. My resolve, so new and so fragile, the one I had clung to in the face of Derek's escalating cruelty, shattered into a million pieces. He was right. It had all gone wrong and no one would believe me. But then Dr. Martinez did something unexpected, something that would alter the course of my life. He didn't just offer a final comforting platitude and leave me to my sorrow. He leaned forward, his expression shifting. The professional sympathy was still there, etched in the lines around his eyes. But beneath it was something else, a steely resolve, a focused intensity that was both startling and compelling. "Monique," he began again, his voice still low, but now imbued with a firm, almost urgent quality, cutting through the fog of my despair. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. What happened to you tonight was not a marital dispute. It was not a late bill argument that got out of hand. What you have described and what my examination confirms constitutes a felony assault. The law in this state recognizes it as such. And as an ER physician who has seen this exact tragedy far too many times, I recognize it as such." He took a breath, his words now carrying the weight of a deep personal conviction. "Last month," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "I treated a woman with a broken wrist who told me she fell down the stairs. I patched her up, gave her the standard pamphlet on domestic violence resources, and sent her home. I followed protocol. I wish I had done more. We read about her in the papers a few weeks later. Her husband killed her. I made a promise to myself that night. Never again. Not if I could help it. Not if the victim was willing to let me help." He looked directly into my eyes, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt truly seen. Not as a hysterical woman or failed wife, but as a human being who had suffered a profound injustice. "I am a mandated reporter, Monique. That means I am legally required to notify the police about a suspected case of domestic violence. But we have a choice in how we do that. I can file a standard anonymous electronic report that some patrol officer might follow up on tomorrow or the next day. A report your husband, a powerful, charming man, could easily talk his way out of. He paused, letting the words sink deep into my fractured consciousness, giving them space to take root. Or you can let me make a direct call right now to Detective Eva Harding. She runs the domestic violence unit for the city. She specializes in cases just like this. She is the best there is. She will believe you. He looked from my face to Tia, who was now staring at him with a mixture of shock and dawning hope. Then he looked back to me. I believe you, Monique. You don't have to fight this alone anymore. Your fight can start tonight in this room. A tiny flicker of something, not hope, that was still too much to ask for, but a raw, primal need for justice, for vengeance for my lost child, for the years of stolen peace, cut through the suffocating grief. It was a pilot light I thought had long been extinguished, buried under layers of fear and self-doubt. I looked at Tia, her eyes wide, her face streaked with tears, but now a fierce light of determination shone through. She nodded fiercely at me, a silent, desperate plea. I turned back to Dr. Martinez, this stranger who was offering me not just medical care but a lifeline, a weapon, and I gave a single shaky nod. In that moment, the entire trajectory of my life shifted. The fight, my fight, began not with a whispered entry in a secret journal, but with the doctor's unwavering gaze and a phone call. Dr. Martinez made 2 calls from the nurses' station just outside my bay. The first was to the hospital's on-call social worker, a calm, steady woman named Carol Jenkins, who arrived within minutes. She didn't bombard me with questions about my feelings or offer useless platitudes. She talked about a plan, about immediate safety. She explained with quiet efficiency that she could get me and my children into a secure extended stay hotel that very night, the cost completely covered by a victim's assistance fund. She handed me a simple packet with clear information on filing for an emergency protective order, with the necessary forms already bookmarked and the number for a 24-hour domestic violence hotline. For the first time, I saw a tangible path forward, a series of steps, not just an insurmountable wall of fear. The doctor's second call was to Detective Harding. Less than an hour later, as I lay in the quiet of the hospital room, the initial chaos having subsided, the detective walked in. She was a tall woman in a practical blazer and sensible shoes, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had a calm demeanor and eyes that missed nothing, eyes that seemed to understand the landscape of pain without needing it explained. She introduced herself, shook my hand, and her grip was firm and reassuring. She looked at me not with pity but with a quiet professional purpose that I found immensely comforting. With Tia holding one of my hands, her presence a silent anchor, and Carol Jenkins taking detailed notes on a clipboard, I told my story. I didn't need my journal. The pain and the facts were seared into my memory. From the first shove in the hallway to the final, fatal blow that had stolen my child from me, I recounted Derek's signature threat. "No one's going to believe you," my voice cracking on the words, the shame of it still so potent. Detective Harding listened without interruption, her expression hardening almost imperceptibly as I spoke. When I finished, my voice raw, my body trembling with exhaustion and the aftershocks of trauma, she simply said, "I believe you, Monique." Those 3 words, spoken with such calm certainty, were like a balm to my wounded soul. Then she looked at Dr. Martinez, who had quietly re-entered the room. "Doctor, your report?" "It will be on your desk by 7 a.m., he confirmed. "It will be comprehensive. The official cause of the fetal demise will be listed as blunt force trauma to the maternal abdomen. I'm also pulling Mrs. Sanders' medical history. I see a visit 8 months ago for a severe shoulder contusion described in the notes as a fall down the stairs. My addendum will state that this prior injury is medically consistent with a pattern of escalating domestic abuse corroborated by tonight's felony assault." As Detective Harding prepared to leave, she paused at the curtain. "Get some rest, Mrs. Sanders. We'll take it from here. Carol will arrange for your transport to a safe location. We will be in touch tomorrow morning." For the first time in years, I felt a tremor of something that might one day, if I dared to let it, become hope. The fight was no longer mine alone. The next morning, the sun rose on a world that felt alien and strange, yet infinitesimally lighter. I was in a clean, anonymous hotel room across town, the kind with generic art bolted to the walls and curtains thick enough to block out the harsh light of a world that had suddenly become too real. Carol Jenkins, the social worker, had arranged everything with quiet competence, ensuring the location was confidential and secure. Tia had stayed with me through the long, dark hours of the night, sleeping fitfully in the armchair beside my bed, a silent, steadfast guardian. The grief was a physical presence, a hollow ache deep in my bones, a constant reminder of the life that had been so brutally extinguished. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, it was mingled with something else. The terrifying, electrifying hum of action, of a system set in motion. The climax of my old life, the life I had shared with Derek, happened without me even being there. Around 10 a.m., as I was sipping a cup of lukewarm tea that Tia had coaxed me into drinking, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a friend who worked as a paralegal in the same downtown office building as Derek's company. Tia read the message, her eyes widening, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Mo," she breathed, her voice a mixture of shock and fierce, vindicated triumph. "They did it. They really did it." She turned the phone around so I could see the hastily typed message. "You are not going to believe this. Police just walked into Derek Sanders' big morning meeting. Cuffed him in front of everyone. Heard it was serious. What is going on?" Tia later pieced together the details from her friend. 2 uniformed officers and Detective Eva Harding had walked into Derek's gleaming corporate office, past the fawning receptionist who always greeted him with a sycophantic smile, and the junior associates who practically scrambled to get out of his way. They had walked directly into his glass-walled conference room where he was presiding over his Monday morning team meeting, projecting an image of power and control. He had apparently tried to bluster, to laugh it off as a ridiculous mistake, perhaps even a prank. When Detective Harding identified herself and stated her purpose, she had simply produced the arrest warrant, her voice calm and unwavering, and read him his rights. The cuffs had clicked shut around his wrists in front of his entire team. He was not accused of marital discord. He was charged with felony assault and second-degree feticide. His power, his reputation, his carefully constructed world of invincibility, it all evaporated under the cold fluorescent lights of the empire he had built. The news sent a wave of nausea and dizzying relief through me. He was gone. The monster was caged, at least for now. But I knew with a chilling certainty that the battle was just beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, a confusing and intimidating new landscape that I was utterly unprepared for. But I was never alone. Tia became my shadow, my rock, my fierce protector. She orchestrated getting the kids from school, bringing them to the hotel, and helping me explain the unthinkable in gentle, age-appropriate terms. Seeing the confusion and hurt in their eyes was the hardest part of it all. But seeing their fierce, immediate loyalty to me, their unquestioning belief, gave me a strength I didn't know I possessed. Jasmine, with the wisdom of her 16 years, simply held my hand and said, "We knew, Mom. We always knew he wasn't good to you." Elijah, my boisterous 12-year-old, just hugged me tight, his small body radiating a protective warmth that belied his age. Dr. Martinez called to check in, not as a physician but as a concerned ally. He connected me with a therapist who specialized in trauma and recovery, a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, whose gentle voice and insightful questions began to chip away at the layers of shame and self-blame I had carried for so long. She gave me tools to breathe through the panic attacks that ambushed me in the quiet of the night, when the memories of Derek's rages played on a relentless loop in my mind. Detective Harding and the assistant district attorney assigned to my case, a sharp, empathetic woman named Alicia Rios, guided me through every step of the bewildering criminal justice system. I met with Alicia in a small, functional office at the DA building, a world away from the opulent law firms Derek frequented. It was cluttered with files and law books, but it felt like a place where real work got done. "Monique," Alicia said during our first meeting, her tone direct but kind, her eyes holding a steady, reassuring gaze. "Your testimony and Dr. Martinez's medical report are the pillars of this case. The felony assault charge is rock solid thanks to the doctor's meticulous documentation and your clear account. The feticide charge," she paused, her expression becoming more serious, "is more complex legally. Laws regarding the death of a fetus due to an assault vary, and Derek's lawyers will fight it tooth and nail, but we are pursuing it because it reflects the true gravity of his crime. It tells the story of what you truly lost, and it gives us leverage. Even if we don't secure a conviction on that specific charge, the felony assault carries a significant sentence." She prepared me for what was to come, for the ugliness of the legal battle. Derek has hired Marcus Thorne, one of the best and most ruthless defense attorneys money can buy. Their entire strategy will be to destroy your character. They will call you a liar, unstable, vindictive. They will try to twist your grief into a weapon against you. Your job, Monique, is to simply hold on to your truth. The evidence, the medical facts are on our side. I spent hours in that small office, giving my official deposition, recounting every shove, every threat, every moment of fear. the words feeling both foreign and painfully familiar as I spoke them aloud to a court reporter. Each session left me drained and trembling, my throat raw, my head pounding. But each time, Tia was there with a cup of tea and a steadying hand, and Alicia was there with a calm, reassuring nod. "You're doing great, Monique," she would say. "You're building the case word by word. You are stronger than you know." The day of Derek's bail hearing arrived, a preliminary skirmish in the larger war. Walking into the courtroom felt like walking into a lion's den. I could feel the eyes of his family members on me, his mother, his sister, their glares burning into my back, their whispered condemnations reaching my ears. Derek sat at the defense table in a tailored suit, his jail-issued jumpsuit replaced, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like himself again, powerful, confident, a master of the universe. And for a terrifying moment, my resolve wavered. I felt small and insignificant, the chump-change wife he had always seen. But then I looked over at Alicia, who gave me a small, determined smile. I took a deep breath and focused on her, on the truth. His lawyer, Marcus Thorne, was as good, or rather, as despicable as Alicia had predicted. He painted a picture of a loving, devoted husband, a pillar of the community, deeply stressed by the demands of his important career, and an unstable, hormonal, and emotionally overwrought wife. He called the incident a tragic accident born of a heated but normal marital spat, suggesting I had tripped and fallen in my agitation. He requested bail, arguing Derek was no flight risk and certainly no danger to me as I was now, he sneered, safely ensconced elsewhere. Then Alicia Rios stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't engage in theatrics. She simply methodically presented the facts. The 911 call made by Tia. The initial police report detailing my injuries and distress, the photographs of my bruises, stark and undeniable. And then she presented Dr. Martinez's sworn affidavit, a detailed clinical account of the internal injuries that had led to the miscarriage. She read his conclusion aloud, his words echoing in the silent courtroom. The fetal demise was a direct result of significant, directed blunt force trauma to the maternal abdomen. An injury wholly inconsistent with a common fall or accidental impact. The judge, a stern-faced woman with tired eyes that had clearly seen this all before, read the documents presented by both sides, her expression unreadable. She looked down at Derek, her gaze like ice. "Mr. Sanders," she said, her voice cutting through the silent courtroom. "Your wife's testimony, corroborated by unimpeachable medical evidence and a credible witness, suggests you are a significant danger to her and to the community. Bail is denied." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Derek's mother let out a small strangled cry. As two guards moved to lead a stunned, ashen-faced Derek away, his eyes met mine. There was no anger, no threat, no contempt. There was only the hollow, dawning horror of a man who finally understood that his favorite line, his ultimate weapon, had been a lie. Everyone believed me, and the system, the one he had always assumed would protect him, was now moving against him with an inexorable force. The months leading up to the criminal trial were the longest, most grueling of my life. The world outside the small, furnished apartment where the Victims Assistance Program had placed me and the children continued to turn, oblivious to the seismic shifts occurring within my own universe. My life, however, was suspended in a strange, anxious limbo, a state of perpetual preparation for a battle I had never asked for, but was now determined to win. I lived with the kids in that temporary space, a place that felt like a way station between a life I had irrevocably lost and one I couldn't yet dare to imagine. My journal, the silent repository of so much past pain, lay untouched in a box in the closet. I had no need to record my suffering anymore. I was preparing to testify to it under oath, to give it a voice that would echo in a court of law. Alicia Rios, the assistant district attorney, was a masterful strategist and a compassionate guide through the labyrinthine corridors of the justice system. She met with me, Tia, and Dr. Martinez countless times, meticulously preparing us for the stand. She walked us through the anticipated lines of questioning from the defense, the subtle traps Marcus Thorne would undoubtedly lay. She warned me with brutal honesty that the defense's entire strategy would be to attack my credibility, the classic sad defense as she grimly called it. Try to paint the victim as an addict or deranged. They can't refute the medical facts, Monique, she explained, her gaze steady and reassuring. Dr. Martinez's report is ironclad. So they will try to refute you. They will try to make the jury doubt your memory, your motives, your sanity. The first day of the trial, I walked into the imposing, wood-paneled courtroom, feeling a terror so profound it was almost paralyzing. The air was thick with unspoken tensions, the weight of expectation. But as I took my seat behind Alicia at the prosecution's table, I saw Tia, Dr. Martinez, Carol, the social worker, and even a few brave friends from my church sitting in the gallery. Their faces a sea of quiet support. I was not alone. That knowledge was a small, flickering candle in the overwhelming darkness. The trial was a brutal, systematic dissection of my life, my marriage, my very character. Derek's attorney, Marcus Thorne, was as ruthless and theatrically brilliant as Alicia had predicted. In his opening statement, he painted me as a manipulative, emotionally volatile woman, deeply resentful of her husband's success and the demands of his career, who was now using the tragic accidental loss of a pregnancy to punish him in a messy, high-stakes divorce. He spoke of Derek's profound grief, his devastation, his unwavering love for his children. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Then I was called to the stand. For 2 long, agonizing days, Alicia gently guided me through my story. I spoke of Derek's early charm, the man I had fallen in love with, the dreams we had shared. Then I recounted the slow, insidious creep of his control, the way his affection had morphed into criticism, then contempt, then outright cruelty. I spoke of the shoves, the financial threats, the isolation, the constant grinding fear. My voice, shaky and thin at first, grew stronger, steadier as I spoke my truth, the words unspooling like a dark, tangled thread I had carried within me for too long. When Alicia had me recount the night of the assault, the argument, the blow, the searing pain, the loss of my baby, the courtroom was utterly silent, the jury's eyes fixed on my face, their expressions unreadable but intent. Then came the cross-examination. Marcus Thorne approached me with a practiced, sympathetic smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. For hours he twisted my words, questioned my memory, and relentlessly tried to portray me as an unstable hysteric, a woman prone to exaggeration and emotional outbursts. Mrs. Sanders, you were under a great deal of stress at that time, weren't you? A demanding job, 2 active children, the pressures of a high-profile marriage. Mrs. Sanders, isn't it true you were deeply unhappy in your marriage long before this incident? That you were perhaps looking for a way out, a way to secure a favorable financial settlement. Isn't it possible, Mrs. Sanders, in the heat of an argument, in your emotional state, that you fell, that you stumbled and tragically struck the corner of a piece of furniture? Each question was a carefully crafted insinuation designed to plant a seed of doubt in the minds of the jurors. But Alicia had prepared me well. I met his gaze, held my ground, my voice steady, even when my hands were trembling in my lap. No, Mr. Thorne. I did not fall. My husband struck me. He hit me with his fist in my stomach while I was pregnant with his child. The next witness for the prosecution was Dr. Raul Martinez. He took the stand with a calm, clinical authority that was mesmerizing. He used anatomical charts and a simplified timeline projected onto a large screen to explain to the jury exactly how the blow I had described would cause the specific internal injuries and the resulting miscarriage. He spoke of placental abruption, of internal hemorrhaging. His testimony devoid of emotion but devastating in its factual clarity. He presented the medical facts as immutable scientific truth. Thorne tried to rattle him to suggest bias. Dr. Martinez, isn't it true that you took a special, almost personal interest in this case from the very beginning? That you went above and beyond standard ER protocol? Dr. Martinez met his gaze without flinching, his own eyes reflecting a quiet, unshakable integrity. Mr. Thorne, I take a special interest in any case where I believe a patient's life or well-being is in danger. My duty as a physician is not just to treat an injury, but to consider the holistic health and safety of my patient. In Mrs. Sanders' case, the physical trauma and the circumstances surrounding it were inextricably linked. I acted according to my medical judgment and my ethical obligations. His testimony was unshakable, a bedrock of fact in a sea of legal maneuvering. Tia testified next, her voice thick with emotion, her loyalty to me radiating from every word. She described the 911 call, her terror, and what she saw when she ran into the hallway, me on the floor, Derek standing over me. Thorne tried to paint her as a biased friend, eager to condemn her best friend's husband. But her tearful, heartfelt account of my fear, of the years she had witnessed my slow descent into despair, was undeniably powerful. Finally, after the prosecution rested, Derek took the stand in his own defense. He was polished, repentant, the picture of a grieving husband and father. He spoke of his deep love for me, his devastation at the loss of our child, a child he claimed he had desperately wanted. He admitted to having a temper, to saying things he regretted in the heat of arguments, but he swore on his children's lives that he had would never intentionally physically harm me. He claimed I had tripped and fallen during our argument, that he had tried to catch me, and that in my grief and emotional distress, my memory had become confused, distorted. It was a masterful performance. I felt the air in the courtroom shift, a flicker of doubt in the eyes of some of the jurors. My stomach turned. But then it was Alicia's turn for cross-examination. She approached him, not with anger, but with quiet, surgical precision. "Mr. Sanders, you claim it was an accident, that your wife fell." Dr. Martinez, a respected ER physician with years of experience, testified that the injury was the result of a direct, forceful blow inconsistent with a simple fall. "Are you saying Dr. Martinez is lying or perhaps incompetent?" "He's mistaken," Derek said, his composure starting to crack, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. "And your wife, Monique, the woman who felt the blow, who lost her child as a result of that blow, is she lying, Mr. Sanders, or is she simply confused as you suggest?" "She's overwrought," Derek stammered, his voice losing its confident timbre. "It was a terrible, tragic accident. She's not herself." Then Alicia produced her final, devastating piece of evidence. "Mr. Sanders, do you recognize this voice?" She signaled to the court clerk, and the audio from the voicemail Tia had saved for months before, the one where Derek had thought I'd called my sister to complain about him, filled the silent courtroom. His cold, contemptuous voice echoed off the wood-paneled walls. "Try telling anyone. They're not going to believe you. No one ever." Derek's face went white. The carefully constructed mask of the grieving, misunderstood husband dissolved, replaced by the raw, ugly face of a cornered bully. He stammered. He contradicted himself. He looked at his lawyer with panicked eyes. His credibility, already fragile, evaporated under the weight of his own recorded words. The jury was out for less than 3 hours. When they filed back in, their faces solemn, I held my breath, my hands gripping so tightly my knuckles were white. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the frantic beating of my own heart. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stood and looked not at the judge but directly at me. "On the charge of felony assault, we, the jury, find the defendant, Derek Sanders, guilty." A sob escaped my lips, a sound of pain and relief so profound it felt like it had been torn from the very center of my being. "On the charge of second-degree feticide, we find the defendant guilty." The world exploded into a dizzying rush of sound and emotion. Tia was hugging me, crying. Alicia's hand was on my shoulder, squeezing gently. Across the room, Derek collapsed into his chair, a broken man, his face buried in his hands. The war was over. Justice, a concept I had almost stopped believing in, had finally prevailed. The moment the judge's gavel fell, its sharp crack echoing through the stunned silence of the courtroom, affirming the jury's verdict, it felt as though the weight of a mountain I had been carrying for years, was lifting off my shoulders. I sat there behind the prosecution's table for a long moment, unable to move. The words guilty reverberated in my mind. The sentence came a few weeks later after a tense hearing where Alicia Rios argued passionately for the maximum penalty and Marcus Thorne pleaded for leniency, citing Derek's previous good character and the unintentional nature of the tragedy. The judge, the same stern-faced woman who had presided over the bail hearing, was unmoved by Thorne's rhetoric. She sentenced Derek to 10 to 15 years in state prison. The number was abstract, almost meaningless in its enormity, but the reality it represented was concrete, irrefutable. He was gone. I was safe. My children were safe. The subsequent divorce was a quiet, almost anticlimactic administrative affair. With Derek convicted of 2 felonies and incarcerated, his high-priced legal team had no leverage left. The proceedings were a formality, a simple untangling of a life that had already been irrevocably severed by his violence and the ensuing criminal trial. I was awarded the house, our family home, free and clear. I received full and sole custody of Jasmine and Elijah, a decision Derek, from his prison cell, did not even attempt to contest. The court also ordered a substantial financial settlement, drawing from his remaining assets and future earnings, ensuring that we could rebuild our lives without the constant specter of financial fear he had so expertly wielded against me. This is my story, a testament to what a woman can endure and what she can overcome when she finds her voice. If you've ever felt unheard, unseen, or undervalued, write a comment 1 in the comments. Let me know you're out there. And if my story resonated, if you believe in standing up for what's right, please consider sharing this with someone who needs a reminder. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Like, comment, and subscribe because stories like mine deserve to be heard.